So welcome to this Green Kite discussion, and we're going to be deep diving into what resilience means for insurance firms who want to grow profitably and sustainably in the 2020s. So we all know resilience has become a real theme of the day, including, of course, for our regulator. But what does it really mean? So hopefully in the course of this conversation, we'll get some answers to some big questions, like what does a rigorous business resilience strategy look like for insurance firms in a post-pandemic world? I say post with my fingers crossed, obviously. What should be in it, in that plan for you and your business and the people you work with in the value chain? How do you get it, resilience, and how do you keep it, more importantly? And we're going to explore, as part of this, some of the important ideas that we here at Green Kite think are important to ambitious, growth-oriented firms. But obviously, really importantly, we're going to bring into that mix the views, experience and insights of our guest experts. So, two very brief points on housekeeping then. We're recording this session. We'd like you to use the chat function, please, and please do remember to mute yourselves as you join us, so we keep that recording nice and clean. We will try to get through as many of those questions as we can, but obviously we'll be following up with those as well. Okay, so let's get started. Now, on the cover screen there, I can actually hear some other stuff in the background. So please, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, just be sure to mute yourselves, because otherwise what's happening in your house is going to come onto the recording. Thank you so much. So you can see your panelists. I'm Sian. I'm right at the end of that covering slide. So from left to right then, Sarah, Richard, Monique and Maxine, welcome. So you can see their CVs, listeners and viewers. So I'm not going to do the standard sort of intro about that, going through those things. Instead, I've asked our panelists to do something a bit difficult, which is actually in about a minute to describe for us, to share with us what keeps them so engaged and passionate about insurance, and how their current role, what they're doing at the moment, actually helps them to bring that personal purpose and set of drivers to life. So I don't underestimate how difficult that is to do in 60 seconds, but I'm going to come to you, Maxine, anyway, to start off with. So introduce yourself through that lens, please, Maxine.
I knew you would start with me. Hello, everyone, and great to be here. I'm Maxine Goddard. I was formerly the head of sales operations and planning at Zurich Insurance, and I'm really an operations transformation specialist. I'll actually be starting a new role, a sumptuous one, come April 1st, and it's still to be announced, so I'll stop there for now and keep you all in suspense. I'll be representing Green Kite today as a board advisor in that capacity, so that's why I'm here. Now, the trick question, Sian, why I'm still here in insurance 22 years later? Well, I'm always fascinated by the fact that despite being a very old industry, over 330 years old, you know, and while we still are very traditional and maintain all the age-old ways, we're constantly evolving, we're constantly growing. I'm an operations transformation person, so looking critically at how we're doing things and making change, that's what I'm about. And critically looking at how we're changing our response to risks, whether it's emerging risks or existing risks, and looking at our risk profile with a fresh lens. These are things that are the green shoots for growth resilience. And of course, there's a few things we want to discuss today that we need to add to our armory, but I love getting involved in change. And interestingly, of course, you know, coming out of the pandemic, typically the strongest will survive and the weak will get weaker, and, you know, the weak will get bought. That's usually the going in position. I've been in the industry now 22 years. And while we're not the fastest, we're not the most flexible, we're probably not the most active, we're pretty alert. There's always an alertness which comes from the cyclical nature of what we do, hard and soft market, and our ability to grab opportunities as they come along. I mean, we're apologetically here to make money. So, you know, and of course, respond to our social purpose as insurance. So yeah, here I am.
So there's lots to keep you passionate and engaged, and you can't tell us how you're going to do that next because it'll be coming soon. So that's great. You heard it here first, or possibly second, folks. Okay, thank you, Maxine. Monique, why do you still care, and what's your current role allowing you to do for your drivers and purpose?
So why insurance? Well, insurance makes the world turn. So on the outside, people don't think it's interesting, but actually, those of us who work here, we know it is. It's a really interesting industry. So that's first. Secondly, I joined Volante back in August, and for me, I've managed to find a company that's it's aligned with its capacity providers. It's allowing me to focus on driving costs down in an ethical way and focusing on the staff. So that's why I'm still here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Richard, what about you?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I guess thinking about this, just as Maxine and Monique were talking there, I guess it's actually down to the people. I really enjoy working with people in our industry, because if I was thinking, you can have some really interesting challenges and issues to be dealing with at work. But actually, if you don't really enjoy the environment you're in, which is created by the people, then it's not much fun, to be honest. And I think I've been fortunate in working with some, really interesting people, highly professional, highly skilled people, and really from quite diverse backgrounds. So I guess people is the first, and secondly, just to kind of reiterate, Maxine, it is constant change within our industry. If you look back kind of 20, 25 years to what our industry looked like against what it looks like today, there's a lot of new things, a lot of new technologies, new processes, new ways of doing things, new ways of thinking about doing things. So that's another driver for me.
Okay, thank you so much, Richard. Sarah, you still care a lot. Why? And how is your current role actually helping you to make that a reality?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Well, I mean, I've been given the great opportunity of setting up my own business to add true value within the insurance sector. I'm with Richard. I think the people are fantastic. I think the opportunities are limitless. And I think the change that we face now is different and at a faster speed than it ever has done before. So we have to be adaptable as an industry and a profession. And I think Green Kite gives me the opportunity to provide that support to firms who want to develop and are ambitious to face the future and innovate. So that's why I'm still here.
Thank you so much. So I think that's a much more interesting way to actually introduce your panelists and speakers. I think you've got a real sense of who they are and why they are as individuals. So thank you very much, panelists. Right, OK, so you could say, couldn't you, that the ultimate proof of resilience is if your firm carries on growing when others don't, or in Maxine's words, are weak and therefore get bought, kind of, right? So Monique, when we've been talking before, you've told me that Volante have actually grown a huge amount. So what's your resilience code then? Share some of that with us, would you please?
So Volante is a really interesting company. It's global. So we've got a lot of small operations globally, and we've been taking on new teams all the way through the pandemic and new staff. I think our focus is on aligning ourselves with our capacity providers so that from their perspective, we only make money if they make money. We do that by having low our commissions only cover our costs and we keep our costs low, and that's where I come in. So I'm centralising resources. I'm trying to keep those low by outsourcing where possible and not building up a huge staff base centrally in the operations team. Mm-hmm. We are being quite flexible, so we originally built our own system. And, we're constantly reviewing everything we're doing. So the system itself, it stops people from having to dip into lots of different systems. It's one system for most teams, cradle to grave. And that has meant that our underwriters spend their time underwriting. So we've taken as much of the burden off them as we can. What else have we done out there? So we focus on our people. We've very much made sure that they're at the heart of everything we do. And I think that helps us as well. The people around us feel that we care.
Great, thank you. There's some really juicy, meaty resilience factors in there. Richard, listening to that, observations, responses, do you recognise HDI's, your business's resilience code from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, resilience is, I see it as kind of, overcoming adversity, in kind of lots of different senses and from lots of different directions. So for me, it's, this isn't rocket science. It's basically, doing the basics right. It's about having good people. It's about having good systems and processes, and probably most of all, having access to good information. Good information, again, in lots of, driven by data and driven by other kind of attributes as well, that you can kind of, understand, process, analyze, that gives you the information with which to make good decisions on the back of it, both for your sort of current portfolios, but also for your forward-looking, sort of strategic planning. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Maxine, coming to you then, as you said, 24-25 years and counting in a variety of businesses. Any comments there on what you're hearing around what actually makes a resilience code, some of those themes, which we're going to dig into in a little bit more detail, but any response to particularly what you heard from Monique there?
Yeah, my first is that it's 22 years, not 24.
Sorry,
anyway.
Sorry.
It's always great to hear the positive stories coming out of HDI and certainly Volante. Congrats to Talbert and the team, as I know it's a new business. But back in March, there was a lot of touching wood going on, sort of jokes being made. And it's clearly not about touching wood. It was really about stabilizing the business to work remotely and then being able to communicate and being connected, really reimagining how we do things. What I noticed, and I'll be really quick, is that we were able to make decisions faster. We were able to prioritize resources faster, risk profiling and risk actions took on a new energy. There was a mad scramble to ramp up employee engagement, that people factor. There was all of a sudden this miraculous ability to make the whole workforce feel as if, they're a valuable part of the team. I've never felt so valued in my life. Most of us stepped up our relationships with whether it's customers, regulators, brokers, it was less about humbug. And we kept the ball on diversity and well-being and ESG and sustainability. So so all of the above spelled to me cohesion. That's what's the pixie dust. Okay. And I'd like to shout out to Zurich Insurance, who understood that balancing all these things, the people as well as the hard numbers, the fluffy and the softer things, that's so important for the way forward.
Okay. Coherence is a really interesting idea as a key theme as well, isn't it? Into thinking about what you're doing in all parts of the system needing to be tweaked, not just particular parts. Yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you. Sarah, everybody, I think, so far has made mention of getting the basics right. And we have a phrase for that at Green Kite, don't we, Sarah?
We do. It's called everyday excellence, Sean. It's about getting the basics right, putting the building blocks in place so that the firm can grow sustainably and can support its people and achieve its purpose. And I'd like to second what everyone else has said this morning. Historically, I think operational resilience was all about BCP. So everyone thought they were a resilient organisation if they could produce a document that said they knew what would happen if something went wrong. I think last year proved that BCPs are not about resilience. They're a document that proves that we can do something. And being an operationally resilient organisation is responding in just the way we did as a profession this time last year. I think what Monique says, it resonates with me. They've definitely, as a new organisation, they've brought resilience to the boardroom. I know some of the things Monique's organisation do on a daily basis to make sure that they, as a leadership team, communicate, get on, know what each other are doing. Now, you'd think that would be easy when you were within the same walls. Actually, maybe doing it this way, remotely, is much easier. You get to strengthen relationships globally. It's not just about the people in the offices next door.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's lots here to explore about what being operationally resilient is like. But I'd just like to say it's not about a BCP. That's just one of the tick box exercises that gets us there.
Okay, thank you very much. And don't forget, everybody listening in, to be using the Q&A function to let us know if you've got any questions and any observations on what you're hearing as well. We're really interested to hear about that. So Richard, Monique talked about aligning with the capacity providers. As a capacity provider, I think there'll be lots of people listening in. I'm very interested to know what you guys actually practically mean by resilience focus, right? And you've alluded to some of that. We've talked about the fact that you're really concentrating there on deeper internal focus on your core processes and data management, everything from underwriting and governance to really deconstructing what a rate actually means. So would you just share a little bit more on some of the detail around people, processes and technology stuff that greater focus on resilience is actually meaning practically for your business, and also maybe just relating to people who would like to deal with you and other members of your other partners in your value chain, the kinds of stuff that they really need to understand about your business at this point in time?
Okay, there's quite a lot there, Sean. I think probably maybe the role I sort of undertake now and have for the past few years really focuses around the performance side of our business, both as a from the MGA perspective and now more recently as a capacity provider. So, you know, I think it's difficult to underestimate just how important data is for our businesses. It's sort of at the heart pretty much of everything we do now. So if we take, for example, a new business opportunity in terms of a delegated authority, the data for us provides us really with the core information with which to make sort of a commercial decision on how we're going to approach that new opportunity. It tells us, it tells us about the portfolio, it tells us about the mix and the profile, it tells us about the growth opportunities, the rating, the price adequacies of the business. It tells us of the risk factors associated, the governance piece, the compliance piece. It's absolutely everything.
Yeah.
If we look at it in terms of the ongoing business, then it's really our regular insights to enable us to track and monitor what's happening in the business. The kind of the richer the data, the better our insights, quite simply. I think if we look back, I was just thinking about this earlier, kind of 10, 12, 14 years ago, around some of the data sources we were trying to bring in and process into the business. Some of them, to be fair, were pretty ropey. And the problem, I don't think
anybody's surprised by that, Richard, to be honest.
And I was thinking of some examples. So if for example, taking claims bordereaux, where you've got let's say four different TPAs, and you have a loss which, say, is kind of an employee falls off a ladder. Okay, now those four different claims TPAs could describe that incident in four different ways, right? It could be a fall from height, it could be a slip, it could be an EL claim, it could be it could be a third party which they've got wrong, kind of thing. And then you'll often have a sort of a free text format description, which is unstructured data, which is not particularly helpful, to be honest. A lot of work since then has been done around the consistency of that data in terms of the codifications, etc., because that's so important for us when it comes to analysing the performance of the book to support our pricing assessments, etc. So data has definitely improved. It's not there, I would suggest. There's still quite a lot to go, but I guess for us as well, it's not only the accessibility to the data and the regularity and the consistency, but it's also what we're doing with it.
Yes.
So it's the kind of the so what of the data.
Yeah.
And how you make that data come alive, to tell the story that you're looking for. So I think we've probably upskilled ourselves in the last X number of years with our ability to answer those sort of questions.
Yeah.
And we're not able to answer those questions with the data sources we have to hand, then it's putting in place strategies with our partners on how we can start to access that data going forward. So it's a sort of constant evolutionary process of improvement.
So everyone's talking about data and has been for a while. You're absolutely right. But I think there, for people listening in, I think what Richard's given you is effectively how they at HDI are thinking about what data resilience actually means. And I'm hearing you to say it starts with data quality and data engineering, right? Whatever phrase you want to put around that, it's standards and standardization, as well as access and automation and making those data sources available in workflows. Fantastic, thank you. Maxine, any response comments to that from you?
Of course, and of course, data is so critical because data is the business. Just take a step back. The good news is that we've had an operational breakthrough with the pandemic. The fundamentals that we put in place started to work. Not perfect, but the speed and the reaction times work. The bad news is that it's going to be even more competitive. And if you remember those digital upstarts, they haven't gone away. They've actually been emboldened. And talking about the Ping Angs and the Lemonades and so on. And so we have zero time to lose, zero time to go back to the old normal. So data, customer connectiveness, customer convenience, the need for simplicity, these things are even stronger now. So we need to make sure we have those plans in place to really ramp up. The customers, they need us to be more flexible, to be more purposeful, more interconnected, and even more human, which is slightly different to the whole digital debate. But, video-enabled digitalization is what we're talking about here, where we're actually talking to humans. So having that data, customer connectivity, we really need to make sure that we are working on the execution pretty quickly. And the pandemic has proven that we can do it when we want to, when we have no choice but to move forward. So I think that's, for me, key to pivot forward, not backwards.
Okay. Sarah, talk about resilience and data. There's a whole world of issues there from a compliance and regulatory perspective, right? Now, that might not be what you want to comment on in response to what Richard's mentioned and shared with us, but so therefore, any thoughts in either direction from you?
So I would say that there's two aspects, and what we need to remember is data isn't just about looking and pricing a product for our customers. It's also about how we run our business. So actually understanding the value of internal data and using that properly, not just so it reaches the board on a quarterly basis, but so it allows your people to engage and understand the risks that the business are exposed to and what role they play in that cog in the organization to keep things moving. And I think it then that data also allows you to manage the risk more properly. So from a resilience point of view, the value and need for people within businesses to understand the internal value of data cannot be underplayed. From a regulatory perspective, obviously there's a requirement to make sure that your products and services as delivered to your customer are right and appropriate. So obviously the understanding of the data from the product space can't be underestimated either. But I think when we look at data, all too often we think about it within the mechanics of the products we deliver rather than the data needed and required to run a resilient organisation.
Yeah. So Monique, referring back again to one of your opening remarks about aligning to your capacity providers, has the stuff you've heard from Richard, I know we've had conversations previously, so none of this is going to be a meteorite coming out of the blue sky, but when you're listening to what you're hearing there, do you recognise your approaches and the decisions and the understanding that you and your business are operating on now, or are there other things that you'd add in?
So, I mean, obviously we're working with capacity providers and we know the importance of information to them. So we are really careful about making sure we're issuing detailed bordereaux that are in the right format, sent to them on a timely basis. We also have a portal, which means they can reach into our system and look at all the information they want. So I know the underwriters in the carriers are finding that really useful. So that really helps.
Monique, just to ask a quick question on that. Is that kind of portal setup, does that feel quite unusual, and maybe to the rest of the panelists as well, because it sounds quite unusual to me?
Yeah, I've not seen that when I was on the other side of the fence. I've not seen that before. Okay. So that does feel unusual, and it's something that they love. So it means that they don't have to wait for us. They don't even have to have an email exchange when they want to look at some of the underlying documentation. So that's worked really well for us. So that's looking upwards at the carrier. But resilience internally, one of the first things I've done moving into Volante is make sure that we're producing all of benchmarking information and performance information around what my operational teams are doing, because that was something that really helped me to get a handle on where we are and where do we need to improve. So it goes both ways. It's internal and external.
Thank you very much. Now we have a couple of questions, and I'm mindful of time. So Anna, I'm going to keep your question on businesses reaching out to customers for a little bit later, if that's okay. And I can see your face, Anna, so if you stick your tongue out at me, I will know. So Nicholas Hale, thank you. Nicholas Hales, has the panel who have cross-cultural international business relationships needed to moderate or alter their approaches across these different partners? Anybody want to take that at this point?
I'm pretty global. I mean, we're lucky in that we are a multicultural organisation anyway. I mean, when you look at our management team, it's probably one of the most diverse in terms of age, culture, everything, gender, the whole lot. I think since the pandemic, no, I think what it's done is just brought people closer together. I don't think we've had any problems with different cultures behaving differently. I think almost this has leveled the playing field by us all being remote.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Right, so moving on to our next question then, and Maxine. So we've talked many times, just one-to-one, but in other fora as well, about the practicalities of taking finite resource and balancing it between building resilience for the now and giving the right attention and early enough to the future issues that really aren't actually that far ahead in the future. So you've said we should be focusing on future factors. Actually, I hear you also saying even more perhaps than the today stuff. I stand to be corrected. So those future factors then, Maxine, please just share with us why and what they are at this point for that building for the next resilience rather than just for today.
Yes, certainly. You know, the future is now, I suppose. It sounds a bit cliche, but I think the 2010 to 2020 decade is pretty much dead now, and the pandemic put a stop to that. I'm a believer in learning from our past, don't get me wrong. The issue I have is that we spend too much time swimming in the quicksand of the past. You know, we always do it. The world shifted a year ago, and we just need to go forward. Yes, of course, we have legacy. Yes, of course, we've invested a lot in our legacy solutions and our systems, and we built deliberate and intentional successful business models around them. But that's changing, okay? So the old ways of being predictable and standard have evolved. It is really and truly about a range of things. Operationally, it's about connectivity and digital acceleration, but there's also the social activism pieces, the ESG, the sustainability, the shifts in our demographic, the way we approach talent, upskilling and reskilling, and making our businesses attractive for them, because at the end of the day, the center point, the pivot in the middle is culture and how we treat individuals and how they treat each other. I think it's so important that we go into this next decade coming to terms that we need to evolve the way how we've done things in the past, be less bureaucratic, be perhaps flatter and fitter and more nimble going forward. And one of the things that particularly bothers me is when new ideas come into the industry, we have a way of taking the old guard and just completely destroying the new ideas in terms of bastardizing them completely so they never even look the same way as they started out. And we're really bad at this, or good at this, if you look at it that way. And the incumbents are coming in and really setting the pace and the way how we need to do execution in terms of taking ideas, really experimenting and developing them, listening to the customers, and building on that experience that's required, because that's the way forward and that's the future. Of course, the traditional building blocks are absolutely still in place, but we need to look more holistically and broadly when we plan for the future. That's my take on this, because I think without it, we really are putting ourselves at a risk and at a disadvantage within the industry, as well as individually as carriers within the industry.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not allowed to have an opinion when I'm fulfilling the role of a facilitator, but lots of what you talked about, actually, insurance has been talking about for the entire time I've been in it, which is 12 years and counting. But that notion of slipping back is the phrase that's been used in the reimagining the London insurance market in the pandemic. I don't know if you've seen the report from LMG and Willis Towers Watson late last year. Sarah, slipping back into the old mindsets, or not slipping forward, changing gear, to look to those future-proofing resilience factors. Any comments on that? Any thoughts of your own?
So I think if you didn't know it and didn't feel it yourself, you've only got to look at the regulator. The writing's been on the wall for a number of years. The FCA with the PRA first introduced the concept of operational resilience. I think it was December 2019, so long before we all actually had to respond. If you haven't realised that senior managers regime is littered with references about getting the right culture, incentivising the right behaviours, training the right people, making sure that you're attracting and offering the right products to your customers, then I don't think you've been reading the regulation correctly. It's all about people. It's all about us providing a societal impact. There's requirements now for us to have sustainability charters. And so I think the regulator at the moment is working with us because he sees there's momentum. But if we do start to slip back, then I don't think we have to look too far for there to be enforcement actions against some of the bigger players that really are abusing their positions of power.
Okay. Monique, those future resilience factors, I hesitate to use the word feature actually, because it does feel like it's tomorrow, not a week from now or a month from now. But anything that you hear from Maxine that you don't violently agree with, or additional stuff in there?
Well, no, I mean, what I heard from Maxine really is agility. That's what we're looking for. We need to recognise what's going on around us and respond to it, and maybe even be proactive about it. It was interesting, she made a point about the market not being very good at, or being too good at stamping on new ideas and new developments. Prior to Volante, I was working on a large project that some may recognise. And in that project, one of the things that we came to realise is this market, we're risk managers. And so when you put a new idea out there, we forget the fact that our market our whole training is about looking for the flaw in everything. And we need to step back and stop doing that when it's looking at advancement in our own marketplaces. We need to start being a bit more, not risk takers, I suppose, in terms of moving forward and allowing ourselves to evolve properly, rather than simply tweaking. We're basically just playing with things around the edges rather than reinventing ourselves to be a more resilient marketplace.
Okay.
And there's so much more we can do.
Thank you. Richard, I'm going to ask you a specific question, but obviously you can ignore that and answer the general one about responding to Maxine's issues if you like, obviously. I'm just wondering, has ESG as a risk, as a tomorrow risk, if you like, has that entered the board agenda yet at your shop?
Let me answer the original question, if I may.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
So sorry, I was just thinking about it while everybody else was talking there, and I think any kind of manager of business out there will recognise the challenges of trying to manage finite resources. In business, as Maxine rightly said, essentially it splits into three parts, right? There's the past with the legacy, there's the now, which is our current, and there's the future. I think I've always been very concerned that we seem to spend most of our time on the now and the legacy. As Maxine absolutely correctly said, legacy is a difficult one because, apart from maybe yourself, Monique, with Volante, you're fortunate position you don't really have a legacy. But for the rest of us, it is a very real part of our everyday working life, and it's very easy, I think, for us to become, blinkered towards what we're trying to do on the sort of the daily basis, because there's plenty to do on a daily basis. And also managing what is the legacy, and the legacy looks like lots of different things, right? It's it's run-off portfolios, it's legacy technologies, it's legacy data, etc. And there's lots of people involved with that. The really difficult bit, I think, is to plan for the future, which is kind of probably the most important part. And I think really the only way to do that is to be very disciplined, to actually put time in the diaries across a sort of a 12-month period or whatever, to specifically take people outside of their kind of everyday work to work on that sort of future planning, in whatever streams that may be, whether it's marketing business development or technology or whatever it might be.
Culture, indeed, right?
And culture, that's a good point. So I think probably that would be my my kind of takeaway for that is really the importance of thinking about what that future looks like 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, because as we've all said, we live in a world of constant change. Change is the sort of the norm in our industry.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We can have perhaps an offline conversation about ESG at your leisure, Richard. Yeah. Thank you very much. Sarah. So I know inside Green Kite, we routinely talk about everyday excellence and resilience, especially growing resiliently. So that's a conversation we're always having internally here. We covered a hell of a lot of ground today. And as we've all said, we could carry on for a lot longer, but we're not going to annoy people by going too much over time. So a difficult question, but in a couple of minutes, top line thoughts of what you've heard today and potentially how they could relate to our ideas, the Green Kite ideas, or new stuff that you're thinking, that's something that we missed out.
So I definitely think that bringing the agenda item of resilience to the boardroom is really key, and making sure that our programme and our development programmes that we have in place allow leaders to be good at communicating but agile in their responses. So I think that is really key, and Valenti seemed to have been able to do that and has prospered during the pandemic as a result. I think what is really key today is the idea about having a purpose as an organisation, and making sure that is communicated, and bolstering people and empowering people. And by that I mean not just the senior managers within the organisation, but empowering people generally, allowing them to make difficult decisions, and actually allowing them to revisit decisions and actually change their mind, because changing your mind doesn't mean that it's a failure. It might just mean that actually you've had a change in strategic direction. I mean, lots of programs of change were put on hold last May through August, and it was a smart decision to re-engineer some of those programs. So it's not a wrong decision. So I think helping businesses develop governance structures that allow this freedom of thought is really key and critical.
Yeah, I was going to say actually, that's where I guess the risk and governance and compliance can be the real friend of the business, an enabler of the business, right? Rather than the blocker that some people, like to label them as.
Yeah, I think, and I think that's definitely my take on the senior managers regime. It isn't a tick box exercise. It was never intended to be as such. Actually, it was supposed to be the mechanism by which firms could properly manage risk and grow and change and transform sustainably and appropriately. It allows you to, or it requires the business to make sure that each function area is properly managed, so they understand it with the use of data. And that's definitely something which at Green Kite we seek to promote when we're helping organisations.
Okay, thank you. So really glad to see actually that Johan, you got an answer to your question, which is a very, very interesting question actually, about how brokers have responded to the kind of approach that Monique and Valenti are taking, that Monique described. So thank you very much for that. Any other questions at this point? Thank you, Monique, from Johan. That's lovely, isn't it? That's a bit of interaction anyway, Monique. Somewhere in the array of faces, Johan is actually doing this, I'm sure. So. Okay, so everyone, we are coming to the end. We're in the last 5 minutes of this rapid lunchtime session. So what I've asked the panelists is to do something a bit difficult again, really, which is to say they're going to speak to you directly, all of you, and say, obviously, apart from thank you very much for spending this time with us, please do this one thing when you get back to your virtual desk or your physical desk or whatever is in store for you next this afternoon. And Monique, I'm going to come to you. You're talking to our audience writ large. What's the one thing that you'd be saying? Please do think or feel.
I think I'd say take time to reflect, especially in this environment. It's easy to let your day job bleed into your work-home life balance, your home life, and forget to take time out to actually stop and think. So take time to reflect about what the future looks like, and then make sure that you're building a solid foundation for you to get there.
Thank you very much. Maxine, speaking to all our listeners and our viewers, what's the one thing from you?
Yes, I know this call is largely operational, but I will say the takeaway for me is about culture. It really is the culture stupid. Your organizational culture is the biggest threat for you, or the biggest asset you choose. How you treat your employees, how they treat each other, how you train them to be entrepreneurial and tech savvy, how you inspire them to develop their careers and have an innovative mindset, how you incentivize them through recognition and reward. It's not always financial. That's key, because culture is really, really that secret sauce. It turbocharges performance and productivity right through operations, finance, distribution, the whole value chain. So I think when you go back, don't just think operationally, think, okay, what is a secret sauce that's going to make my organization go forward in the future in a strong, cohesive way?
Okay, thank you very much. Richard, you're going to say to the folks gathered around our virtual table here today, do, think or feel this. What would it be?
So I would say, when we talk about doing the basics right, that to me means basically to challenge and keep challenging your existing systems and processes. Kind of like I like the expression as a sort of chief revolutionary officer, on the basis that, you know, change is the constant. Keep looking at how you're doing things and make sure that they're fit for purpose and fit for purpose for the future. Okay,
right. Well, you heard it here first. We want chief revolutionary officers in carriers and everywhere else, right, Richard? Yeah, you'd be happy as capacity providers to be dealing with chief revolutionary officers in your supply chain as well, would you?
Yes.
Yeah, you're going to think about that a little bit harder. Okay, thank you very much. And Sarah, obviously what we're not going to say is come and talk to Green Kite, because that would be crass and awful, wouldn't it? But what's the one thing that you would be saying to people to think, feel or do around this whole big topic of resilience?
So I think it's about understanding your firm's purpose and communicating that. And I think that links so neatly with what Maxine said about culture and the people. It's about everyone buying in and knowing what role they play within the organisation and why that's important. It's incentivizing people for the right behaviours, but telling them what are the right behaviours in your organisation, and that's all part of the company purpose. So communicate the company purpose and get buy-in from your people. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much, panelists. It's been really good. Thank you. Breakneck speed, but lots of rich insight and action and so forth for everyone hopefully dialing in to have benefited from. Thank you so much for the questions that we've had as well. This recording will be made available and we'll tell you all about it, obviously, should you wish to review it again and or share it with other people. So all that's left for me to say is thank you so much to everybody, to our panelists and to the people joining us here today, and see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.